Now in a college dorm, you don't get too much space, especially desk space. Now for most people this isn't much of a problem. You can go online, buy a laptop, do your work on it, and it folds up nice and small so you can put it on a bag, on a shelf, or even in your fridge because it doesn't have food in it, because who can afford food? You're in college, you don't need food anyway. But unfortunately for things like engineering majors that need much more processing power, or if you just really like playing video games instead of doing your college work, a laptop just isn't going to cut it unless you've got a pretty good chunk of money. And even if I did, I wouldn't want to carry around a laptop that's more like a briefcase full of lead. Now, even if you live in a small dorm, purchasing or building a full-size PC is definitely an option, and if you're more space conscious, you can even try and shave off some of the bulk by building a smaller mini ITX computer. However, if you're like me and think that just isn't small enough, there's a whole nother league of cases above mini ITX. This is the Ghost S1 by Louqe.
Louqe.
The Louqe S1, one of the smallest small form factor cases with full GPU support out there. It's only 8.2 liters in volume if you want to be exact. And while it does make some sacrifices to get that small, it might just be worth it for you. And that's where this video comes in. This is my extremely in-depth review / guide to the Louqe Ghost S1. Now, if you've ever built a custom PC before in pretty much any modern case, you'll know what to expect for build quality. You've got mostly thin aluminum that doesn't have much structure until you fill up the case with components, and very thin side panels with a lot of flex. You gotta make sure not to step on them while building. Better throw them in the box to keep those safe. And case makers have had us believe that this is good build quality. They've made it the status quo for computer cases. But this case is what made me finally stop believing them. It's made of nothing but thick side panels machined out of solid blocks of aluminum. This leads to no flex in any of the side panels and even perfect rigidity with absolutely no system inside of it. I bought the ash finish, which is their word for black, which carries on as much quality as the rest of the case. I've thrown this case into backpacks and bumped it and scratched it up against plenty of things, and every scuff rubs right off, leaving the case looking like new to this day. Every inch of this case just screams quality, and I love it. Alright, so this is going to be the build portion of the video. I thought it would be a good idea to do this live instead of voiceover, or because you get more of a hands-on experience of what it is like to actually build this, not just a summary. Also because this is a bit of a different case. There's a few little tricks to building in here, and it's just much easier to show you live, so I can show you the best way to build in a case like this, because it is a bit of a steeper learning curve than just building in a normal case. So you can definitely just take this out of the box and slap a build into it and be fine, but it's a much better idea to definitely plan out ahead of time, much more than you would a normal case, because then you'll benefit from it greatly, especially airflow wise. You can throw a build in here with a bunch of cables everywhere and it won't be great, but if you plan out beforehand, you'll thank yourself so much while building in here, because it can be a pain if you don't plan. So I'm going to take you through, show you what the building experience is like, also give you some tips that I've used along the way. I've built basically the same system in here multiple times, and every time I have, the system has gotten better airflow and it's looked significantly better. So I've definitely got a few tricks under my sleeve for building in this thing that I hope can help you out as well. So it comes fully assembled, I believe, in the box. You do, on top of your normal Phillips head screwdriver, you will also need Torx, maybe? I don't know, in my kit, it's a T10. You get I believe an Allen key with the case, but I just use this. Get yourself one of these. The first thing that come off is this top panel here. You got 4 screws. Alright, so once those first 4 screws are out, this top panel is now only held in by magnets, and you got the little pull tab right here to just pull it out. And that's the first piece. You can go ahead and set that aside. And then without those screws, these all now slide out. And then you might have noticed my IO shield is already taped in. I don't know if it's just because I've taken this IO shield in and out of so many cases, or if it's just because of this case, because it doesn't snap in. So I've actually had to use some tape on the inside to get mine to stay in a little bit better. Now you can just go ahead and build like this with the top and the 2 side panels off, but I really recommend getting everything off because this case is so modular. You can even move this power supply bracket if you want to, which we will be taking that off, but I'm going to go ahead and also take the bottom off. Again, just 4 screws, 1 in each corner. You take this off, and then this also has a laptop sized drive bay on it, which we're also going to take off as well. And then you can separate this little drive cage from the bottom of the case. Now if you want to, you can go even further with removing panels on the sides. I have done a build where I've removed the side panels as well, these 2 right here. It didn't help that much. If you want to and you feel like it'll help you, you can go ahead and do that. Also, I believe this power supply bracket is mounted normally 1 more down than I have it. The screws for that are right here. You can mount it anywhere. So it's normally mounted in these 2 holes right here. I've moved it up 1. You can also mount it down here. Moved it up to give myself more clearance with the cables on the bottom and the drive I'm going to mount down there. It just makes things fit a little bit better. So if you do have a drive down there and you're like me and you haven't shelled out the money for custom length cables, I would recommend mounting the power supply bracket up 1 more. And then this riser cable right here is mounted in there once you get it. The next thing you are going to have to take out are this here and this here. These are on the other side, you'll see they're brackets for holding in your GPU. So go ahead and move those 2 screws, and this bracket along with a spacer here will fall out, and a spacer here will fall out along with those, to make sure to catch those. And this will pop out. These are for holding your GPU into place. It's much easier to show you once we get the GPU in what these exactly do. So now I'd say we're ready to start mounting stuff in. Now in this build, I didn't want to compromise on anything. You might notice in here that you've got your space for your motherboard here, your power supply here, and your GPU on the other side. And you might be wondering if you're gonna have to go all NVMe on storage. That is actually not true. I do have an NVMe drive that I'm going to be mounting in my system, but you're not limited to just these. I'm one of those people that needs more than just 1 drive in my system, so on top of this NVMe drive, I'm also going to be showing you how to mount 2 2.5-inch drives in this system as well. I've got a hard drive and a solid state drive that I'm going to mount in here as well. I believe max I could mount in here without throwing SSDs all over the place is 3. And then of course, if you really want, there's extra space in the top to just have SSDs flailing around if you really need. So here's the motherboard that I've prepared beforehand. All I did was seat in the CPU, the cooler, and the RAM. That's all you really need to do. Just standard what you do before you put your motherboard in a case. You want to get as many things seated in there as possible. Let me just throw this NVMe drive back in there real quick. Alright, and then once you have all that seated in, we're good to go and put the motherboard into the case. Okay, so there should be 4 pre-installed standoffs that you don't have to worry about because the only motherboard support for this case is ITX. So you'll go ahead and take your motherboard. It does mount upside down in the case, the IO shield facing this way. You just throw it in there as you normally would. And then there are 4 of these longer screws with the rounded tops that you can throw into each of your standoffs. Sorry if you can hear that, but upstairs it sounds like the neighbors are moving furniture for winter break, despite the fact that this is a college dorm and all furniture is provided in its place. And then once you got your 4 standoffs screwed in, you can go ahead and move this PCI riser straight into your PCI slot on your motherboard that lines up real nice. Just show it in there, and then you're good to go there. Your motherboard is mounted. Then your front panel I/O will actually go in. It's a manual on the website because these are not labeled. It'll tell you which color corresponds with which, and then you look at your motherboard or your motherboard manual to figure out where to plug it in. And these will actually be mounting underneath our power supply right here, so they will go underneath and our power supply will go on top. It makes it all look very clean. And because this is more of an unorthodox build, we will be going in a more unorthodox build order. So next we will be putting in our first hard drive. I recommend if you do have a hard drive and an SSD, this be the SSD because this mounting point, because it's a bit more of a tight fit. So our first mounting point will be along with our front I/O cables. It will be right here behind the power supply. It's going to screw in on the other side. So you take your case, put it like this, put your SSD here, and screw in from this side. And now, for cable management trick number 2, our cables for our SSD will actually come over here in the GPU side of the case and be hidden nice and snugly behind the GPU. And both of these will be hidden behind the GPU, and it'll all look very nice and help with airflow. Speaking of the GPU, we can mount that next. We'll come over to this side. We will make sure this tab right here is open. That should snap into place like so. You are then free to move this clip into the locked position. Keep it in there nice and good. And now we will replace those 2 brackets that help hold your GPU in place right here. So if you notice, one of those brackets will go in right here and cover this hole right here. That would be this one. It'll come in from the top here, cover that up, and then you'll have the spacer on the back to hold that in. And on the one on the bottom here is just a spacer to hold in the pins at the bottom of your GPU. Now that both of those are screwed into place, your GPU should be nice and sturdy. It is also hiding the cables from your SSD. At this point, we can now route the power cables to your GPU. Cable management tip number 3 is that the cables for your GPU will be back here with your SSD and your I/O cables right here. They'll get hidden behind the PSU and they'll look very nice. And those will route right here behind the power supply and look very nice. Next, we can finally mount that power supply we've been talking about so much. Power supply will come in right here and mount onto this bracket right here, also hiding all of these cables in your SSD. Alright, so at this point, now once you've got your power supply mounted, you can go ahead and connect all of these cables that you've routed before. Then we have this cable right here, which routes over to the back over here, so you can actually plug your computer into the wall without having to open it up. That usually I'm able to shove right in here. Slip it right through and plug it in right there. It fits in real nicely. So next, we are actually going to put in our motherboard power. Alright, now we've connected all of our power supply cables. We'll eventually tie these down with something like a zip tie or something. But next we are going to mount our second hard drive, which will go right up here with the bottom plate, and we can put that in. So here's the little mounting bracket for that hard drive. We're going to slip it in here first. We're then going to attach that to the back of this bottom panel, right around here. Alright, so now we have the hard drive mounted to the bottom plate. We're going to go ahead and tidy our cables up a little bit and shove that in there. Of course, not before connecting both our SATA power and our SATA data cable. Alright, now that bottom's on there and our hard drive is in. Then we got this SATA cable to deal with. Pay no attention to the USB 3 connector I just stabbed myself on. And then at this point, we are pretty much done. Our cables, since we planned it out, we don't really have much cable management work to do. All of our GPU and SSD cables are routed right here. Our IOs under the power supply, our SATAs here, our power is all also bundled up nicely under the power supply. Since we planned it out, we actually don't have much more work to do other than put the side panels on and see if she turns on. So once again, these just slide into place. Your first time, a couple of the cables might be caught in here. Just make sure to push them down a little bit, and it should go right over. And if you haven't already, you can attach the little loop you got to the back of your thing. Put that towards the back. Set that on. You can either have it set on there magnetically, or you could go ahead and screw it in. And there you go, you have a fairly well cable managed Ghost build that should hold up well with airflow. The building experience is definitely a bit more challenging than in a normal case. You get a lot more wiggle room for mistakes, and here you definitely have to plan out if you want a good build, but it's not too challenging. You get a grasp on it. I would definitely see if you could do more than one build, because you definitely learn a lot through your first build that you can use on your second build. And then once you get the hang of it, small form factor PC building actually isn't too hard. Now in this part of the video, I will talk for a very long time about very boring things like numbers and math. Feel free to skip to the time code on screen if you're not interested in any of that, and if you do stay, I will try to make this section as interesting as possible with the help of visual aids in the form of me drawing on a whiteboard. Enjoy. As another prerequisite for this section, all of the testing in this video was done on an Intel i7-9700K cooled by a Noctua NHL9X65, a Founders Edition RTX 2070 Super, and an ASRock H310 ITX board with questionable VRMs and a BIOS that I might have slightly broken. With the way the GPU chamber is designed, thermals are pretty good for the GPU. A full-size card has plenty of room to breathe through the perforated side panel and even take in air from the top or the bottom of the case if it needs to. However, moving on to the other side of the case, this is where problems start to arise. Understandably, being limited to such a small CPU cooler, thermals aren't the best over here. At stock speeds on a performance-oriented fan curve, we see idle temps at around 38 degrees and 77 degrees under an IDA64 synthetic load. However, where an even bigger problem arises is due to this tiny fan on our Noctua cooler. Small fans are loud, especially when they have to spin faster on average to maintain temperatures. Because they have less surface area, and it's also cooling a heat sink with less than average surface area. In my testing, in a fairly quiet room, I saw 52 decibels at idle and 61 decibels under synthetic load on the same performance fan curve. Now, one solution to this problem would be to make a custom fan curve that's more optimized for silence rather than performance. This means keeping the fan at as low of an RPM as often as possible in exchange for some warmer temperatures. At idle, this brought our noise down to 49-ish decibels. Temperatures increased significantly to around 45 degrees. Under synthetic load, we also brought our noise levels down slightly to around 57 decibels, but temperatures raised to 79 degrees. So the silent fan curve did marginally bring down the noise level, but by not too much of a noticeable level, and temperatures were definitely suffering. However, there is another solution to this problem, and that's undervolting, which is very similar but also very different from the concept of overclocking. When overclocking, you're trying to gain performance by manually raising the clock speed of your processor or the amount of instructions it can complete in a given amount of time. When doing this, your clock speed will eventually become unstable at your current voltage. So you raise your voltage to compensate for that instability. However, the amount of voltage being delivered to your CPU is a large factor in the amount of waste heat that it outputs. This heat needs to be dissipated through a cooler, which usually includes some sort of fan at some part of the process. And fans make noise. Therefore, voltage equals heat, which equals noise. Yes, very scientific, I know. So another way to make our system run quieter would therefore be to reduce our waste heat output by decreasing voltage. Now this can be completed through underclocking, but we don't want to be lowering our clock speeds and sacrificing performance and making our computer slower. This is where undervolting comes in. Much like the overclocking or underclocking clock speeds you're trying to reach have a range of voltage at which they are stable, so do the stock clock speeds on your processor, which are usually set at a median value out of the factory, so an accepted range of CPU bins can achieve that speed, and then AMD or Intel can then sell them to you. So depending on how much better your specific CPU is than that accepted bin will dictate your stable voltage range at stock speeds. Keep in mind that the quality of your power delivery on your motherboard's VRMs as well as your power supply will contribute to this as well. You can find your stable voltage range by slightly lowering the voltage you give to your CPU in either your BIOS or your CPU's software. which is the Intel Extreme Tuning Utility and AMD Ryzen Master respectively. Continue lowering your voltage and stress testing your CPU at full speed until it becomes unstable. When your machine begins randomly powering off, freezing, or blue screening, bump the voltage back up a little bit, and then you have reached about the lower end of your stable voltage range for your stock speeds. For me, that was an offset of negative 159 millivolts. Now that you've done this, in theory, your CPU should be taking in less voltage, therefore outputting less heat, and allowing your fan to spin slower, reducing noise. Now with my 159 millivolt undervolt, idle temperatures stayed about the same at 37 degrees on my performance-oriented fan curve and yielded the same noise level because there's not too much you can do at idle because your CPU is still drawing basically no power at idle no matter what. And under synthetic load in IDA 64, I saw a huge improvement in temperatures by 7 degrees at 59 decibels. Now this isn't too much quieter, but when we combine this undervolt and a silent fan curve, that's where the real benefits start coming in. We idle a little high at 45 degrees because again, we're not going to see too much changes at idle, but we're almost completely silent here compared to the ambient noise floor of the room. Then, at a full synthetic load, we hit a high of 72 degrees at only 55 decibels, a massive improvement over our stock temperature and noise level. On top of this, thanks to those lower temperatures, the 9700K is able to sustain higher boost clocks for longer, resulting in an extra 300 points in Cinebench. Now that this undervolt is dialed in, here are some other benchmarks as well, just if you're interested. Here we also see that despite certain games like Borderlands 3 that still definitely have some optimization work to do, this build is also an extremely competent little 4K gaming box as well. So if you haven't noticed it by now, this case is extremely small and still manages to fit full-size GPUs inside of it. Just to get a sense of scale, the case I was using before was the NZXT H200, another ITX case that's already considered to be decently small. This entire case fits inside of it, easily. Because of this, I'm able to take this entire thing, keyboard, mouse, controller, and cables, all into a backpack. One thing I find myself doing very often is heading down to one of the common areas in my college dorm and hooking up to one of the 4K TVs. Then I'm able to order some pizza, invite some friends over, and have a great time. The console form factor is so convenient, and thanks to this setup, I don't have to settle for just a console. It's honestly astonishing that I'm able to have a compiling, video editing workstation and a 4K gaming machine in such a small package. This is a prime example of showing that the need for giant desktop computers is going to be a thing of the past very soon, especially as power and thermal efficiency improve. Smaller form factors are the future, and this is a glimpse into that future that you can buy right now. Now, one aspect that definitely comes with buying into the technology of the future today is a hefty price tag, but a $269 price tag on a computer case is a very hard thing to swallow, with the average price of popular custom computer cases hovering at or below the $100 mark. Does this case justify being well over double that? Well, the short answer is yes, simply because there's nothing else like it on the market. No other small form factor case exudes the same sense of quality with a pristine finish and amazing build quality that only comes from being milled out of solid blocks of aluminum. But if you're willing to sacrifice a bit of that build quality and still want to get in on this ultra small form factor, there are other options for you. The A50 and A60 by Geek offer a similar form factor at only $70 and $80 respectively. There are also other form factors like the classic Node 202 from Fractal Design and other cases that manage to be even smaller by eliminating support for full-size GPUs. In the description, I'll leave links to a spreadsheet from the Small Form Factor PC subreddit that lists many cases for you to find what suits you best. There are plenty of deals to be had if you're willing to run Google Translate on some international sites. I'll also leave a link below to the Small Form Factor PC subreddit itself. There are a lot of people on here that have done extremely creative things with the form factor, and this subreddit never fails to give inspiration for more builds. So yes, the Ghost S1 is a very expensive case, and it definitely isn't for everyone. But if you're willing to pay for quality and want to invest the time and money into this form factor, you won't regret it. This case really speaks to the future of PC building and what it has in store. It also shows what small boutique case manufacturers can do. I hope that cases like this can inspire others to put their designs out there as well. And if there's anything you feel like I didn't cover, or you have any other questions about this case, feel free to leave them in the comments below and I will do my best to respond, or even create a follow-up video if the question warrants it. But until then, I'll see you in the next video. Yes, hi, future me here, and there are also these things you can buy for this case called top hats, which are modular extensions you can add on, but I could do an entire video on just those, so we're gonna not do that.